Hey, this is Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with another Random Thoughts podcast. This time we're going to be doing a Red 5 Roundup for the month of March of year 2022. And unfortunately, this is when I was in crunch time for taxes. And so I'm going to say that I don't have as much notes on this, but I definitely want to talk about the things that I do have notes for. So first off, certain point of view. They asked the question, did we need a Kenobi trailer? And now keep in mind, I'm recording this in June. This is back in March before we saw any of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I thought, I have thoughts on that. So I'm going to try to relay what my thoughts were then. And then talk a little bit about, now that the show's happened, how I feel about that. So, do we need an Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer? In some respects, I agree with you. We didn't need it. They brought Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan. At this point, Hayden was unconfirmed, but was pretty much confirmed, and everybody pretty much assumed it. And so, that's enough to pretty much make anybody who is a diehard Star Wars, like, you don't need to hype up Star Wars fans, and there are a lot of Star Wars fans. For the normies, I think you just need a trailer. We don't need these continual, like a teaser gets you there, but it's like trailers were coming out and we're going to get more teaser trailers, and everybody's like, when's another trailer? And it's like, okay, do you need another trailer to watch the show? No. Why do you want it spoiled? However, I think, and they never really did this, but a trending trailer that would have dropped like on a big sports game or something like that, something that would have got a lot of attention, I think might have caught the people who don't have their ears to the ground. Like, most people don't know that there's like 20 different Star Wars projects that are supposedly in the work. They're clueless to that. Like, they think that they like fell upon and discovered Mandalorian. They're, maybe they didn't even see Book of Boba Fett. It's amazing how the general audience doesn't know that. Like, if there was a Star Wars movie in theaters, my dad would go see it. My dad didn't know The Mandalorian existed. We have Disney Plus. I gave him the Disney Plus. Like, he goes on there, he doesn't understand what The Mandalorian is. He doesn't even know that's Star Wars. I had to push him to watch that. He's just not geared to search that stuff out. I feel like there's a lot of audience that like, oh, hey, there's a new Star Wars film. Oh, yeah, we'll go check that out. That'd be a fun weekend movie to see with the guys, or to go out on date night or whatever. But when it comes to actually searching it out and finding out, like, they don't. So a trailer could do that in the right places. But at the same time, just like people aren't seeing those things, they're not going to see a trailer. Now, what about how I felt, though? I was going to see Kenobi. I was always going to see Kenobi, but I was going into Kenobi very pessimistic. I'm not a fan of the prequels. I like episode 1, but I don't like episode 2 at all. It's my least favorite Star Wars movie. And I don't really like episode 3 that much either. So while I do think Ewan McGregor did a really good job, and Obi-Wan is a character that I really love, my love of that period more comes from the Clone Wars. And then the period of time this is going to be set, Rebels. It takes about 5 years after this. So I'm intrigued. I want this story. I want it to be good. However, looking at how they handled characters like Luke, Han, and Leia, I just look at this and I go, this is not going to go over well. Because they haven't touched Obi-Wan. They're about to touch Obi-Wan. And if they don't knock it out of the park to where they get 80-90% of Star Wars fans on board with what they do, there's always going to be that 10 to 20% that's just, they're never going to forgive Disney. Disney would have to sell it to Fox or give it back to Lucas or something, and even then they might still be upset. They're at that point. You're never going to win them back. Don't even try. But they need to knock it back so that it's not like The Last Jedi, where it is truly Last Jedi was a 50-50 split, and people go, oh no, there's not that many people like it. There are a lot of people that like The Last Jedi, but it definitely was, either 50-50 or 60-40. It was a big split in the fan base, how you felt about that. And I feel like a lot of the people who really love The Last Jedi would not have been angry at a movie that would have been appealing to the people who didn't like The Last Jedi. They may like if they were given the two movies, they might have liked The Last Jedi better. Like, they like the whole broken down Luke thing, but I don't think they would have been offended by just showing Luke like he was in the EU. Whereas you have this other side of the fan base that was extremely offended by that. Now you're dealing with Obi-Wan. It's going to be kind of the same situation where I can see this being yet another huge divide in the fandom. Being the last straw for a lot of prequel fans. It's just a big, risky thing for Disney. And after the Book of Boba Fett, I didn't have a lot of faith in this. Now here's where the trailer came in. So my expectations were extremely low before the trailer. After the trailer, it was way up high. Why? Because we had the Inquisitors. And who's in charge of the Inquisitors? Who's, attaches himself to everything with these characters? That's a Dave Filoni character. And as we know, all the original characters that Dave Filoni did for the cartoons, he's, super attached to. And we look at somebody, despite all the stuff that I didn't like about Book of Boba Fett, everything done with Cad Bane was done really well. Everything done with a lot of his other characters, when they come back, when they're shown in live action, be it Ahsoka or whatever, Dave Filoni is there to make sure they're handled right. And it just gives me this extra layer of confidence that he's more involved. When it was just going to be, yes, Deborah Chow worked on The Mandalorian, but she's not writing it. When I'm looking at the writing staff and, okay, this is a different writing staff. This is not part of the Dave and John, Mandoverse. This isn't a different time period. This isn't all tying in and leading to Thrawn, as far as I know. That'd be a weird place for him to first show up, talking to Vader or something in the Obi-Wan show. But in my mind, this told me, okay, he wouldn't just hand it off to writers without having some say so. This, and if anything, a character like Obi-Wan is the kind of character that Dave Filoni truly gets. So I'm excited. Fast forward to having seen Obi-Wan. First 3 episodes in, and I really feel like this show is trying to do a lot to justify the sequels. It's doing a lot of the stuff we saw in the sequels with the prequel characters and with the OT characters. And, we're seeing Leia do some stuff with these, Rey. We're seeing Obi-Wan being a lot like old Luke. And it's, rubbing me the wrong way. Then the Inquisitors, the specific thing they're like, the Grand Inquisitor is totally off. He does not feel like the Grand Inquisitor at all. He doesn't have the presence of the Grand Inquisitor. He looks weak. He looks like he's the lowest person there. And then Reva's just walking all over the place, and she doesn't act like any of the other Inquisitors. It just feels off. I mean, she's going by the name Reva. She's not third sister. That's not Inquisitor-like. And why is she, of all people, obsessed about Kenobi? Why isn't... you'd think that'd be Vader or the Grand Inquisitor, not some random Inquisitor. It's a really weird choice. And, of course, I had a problem with how the Obi-Wan and Vader fight ended. I didn't have a problem with Kenobi being out of practice and cut off from the Force and that stuff, but I didn't like how much it spent focusing on how miserable his life is and how without hope he is. Because he had a purpose. He had something he was supposed to be doing, communing with Qui-Gon. He's supposed to be looking after the boy and preparing to train the boy. And so to me, him being just so miserable and so without hope, I get everything that happened to him, but he isn't without purpose, and he's not. And if they are trying to do a transformative arc over the season, I don't think 6 episodes are enough. Not when we're at episode 3 and he's still so in the slump. That gives us 3 episodes to get him to the path of A New Hope, Obi-Wan. And I don't know. I feel like the trailer, in retrospect, I had very low expectations. I think if I'd gone in with those low expectations, I would have probably been playing it off more cool, but because my expectations were raised, now I'm having trouble, which is funny because for everybody else, Hayden and Ewan McGregor was what hyped them up. For me, it was seeing the Inquisitors, and they've been one of the worst parts of the show. So, did we need a trailer? It definitely got me to tune in at midnight or watch those 2 episodes that first night, but did we need it? Not really. Okay, Sarlac Digest. You had a theory of something that might happen, and Dave Filoni, he takes a lot from Legends, makes it canon. And we see Samuel L. Jackson, he's saying, put me back in, coach, put me back in. I want to be part of these TV shows. As Mace Windu, he's still alive. And you said, now, I do think personally that Mace, being alive, he survived falling out that window. Now, I don't want to see Mace Windu past Return of the Jedi. That just, nah. And maybe it's best to be in, like, if we're going to show him, like, right after Order 66, like in those first 5 years, him going and confronting, within like a year or 2, confronting Vader and Vader killing him, and like that being the full story arc of the character, I could totally see that. Probably better in animation. Would be a cool, like, main and villain in a Vader show. Like if you showed Vader hunting down Jedi and being like what we saw him doing to Obi-Wan, like totally wrecking shop. I think a lot of people would be down for that. The big end battle could be Mace Windu. But that might be better done in animation. I don't know. Because, you don't have to de-age him and stuff like that. But Sarlac Digest had an interesting thing. Now, since they're wanting to do Thrawn in the Mandoverse, one of the things attached to Thrawn in the original books was Saboth. Now, Saboth was a Jedi who had died, and the Emperor had him cloned, and successfully was able to clone a Force-sensitive Saboth, but unfortunately he was not mentally stable. The way he was cloned caused him to be crazy. So here he is, a Jedi, but he's insane, and he's going evil. But he has immense power, where he can, from star systems away, he can mentally help guide all the pilots to better succeed in battle. Wouldn't it be cool if instead of Saboth, we play a similar role, but as Sarlac Digest suggested, like crazy clone Mace Windu, like from his cut off arm, like clone him. That would be amazing. I think Samuel L. Jackson, if he came in that, it would give you the star power. It would bring in the new fans who don't fully know, but you would have enough of the story arc for all the OT fans. Like, oh, they're doing Saboth. They're doing that character I love, and they're pairing it with Thrawn, which builds up the new Rebels Thrawn, the new canon Thrawn, and taking one of his most brilliant plans from the previous canon and pairing it together. And I think that would be great. The other thing that I think would definitely be cool to have happen is there's a character in there that's kind of like the king of the thieves, that ends up, who's in charge of Mara Jade and all that stuff. That character is very much, I think, what inspired Hondo Tanaka. So if you had Hondo come in and play the role of that character, I think you would, and bring that into live action, I think you would blow fans away. So that's what I would add to it. Let's do the Thrawn trilogy. Maybe even in movie scale, like have Mandalorian, all these shows build up to it, and then have a Star Wars movie by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, or Bryce Dallas Howard could also do it. I would love her to do that. Okay, next one, Dork Wars. Dork Wars. You had a podcast all about the differences between DC and Marvel, and I really enjoyed this podcast. Excuse me. This one really got me because I look at DC, and DC is mostly aliens and magic. Basically, when you look at the different characters they have, they're like people of legends and they have some mutants. On the flip side, you look at Marvel, and it is predominantly people with mutants, and they have a little magic, little aliens, but it is like so much mutants is like the biggest way that people have powers. And I would say that they both equally have people with tech. Batman has a ton of villains with tech, and he himself is tech. You have Iron Man and Falcon, and there's a ton of tech-based people. But when you look at DC, and you're like, okay, you got Superman, and you got Hawkgirl, and you got Martian Manhunter, and it's like you start going through it, and it's like, okay, a lot of these people are aliens. Aliens who came to Earth and are superheroes and have amazing powers. And you go into Marvel, and it's like you have like the X-Men mutants, you have the New Human, Inhumans type mutant things, I don't know, subspecies or whatever you want to call them. And then you have the Hulk, so the gamma irradiated mutants, and then you have the eugenics mutants that are all like like a lot of the Spider-Man rogues gallery are all based off eugenics, and so you have all these different ways that people are becoming mutants in Marvel, and so that's kind of the big thing. And so it's funny because I think when you look at the movies, it has very much felt like, Marvel is much more into space. Well, that's because we're getting Guardians of the Galaxy movies and the Avengers movies are going out into space. But when you think about Marvel in general, and Marvel has a bunch of cosmic baddies, you have Galactus, you have Ego, you have these different things. However, I think on a scale, like, you have Green Lantern, he's a human who receives alien-based powers. You have Blue Beetle, another human who receives alien-based, but you have the Green Lanterns. He's literally a galaxy cop, constantly bringing in all these different villains. Superman fights aliens from all sorts of planets, because that's usually the only way anybody's powerful enough to beat Superman, is they have to also be an alien with amazing alien powers. And so it's just kind of interesting that like that's a big difference. Is one is people from Earth gaining extraordinary powers, and the other one's basically people from other planets coming to Earth with extraordinary powers. Now they both have their kind of mystical, magical characters. I do feel like DC has a lot more of that. but they both have quite a bit of that, and they both have quite a bit of people with technology. Once again, Marvel might have a little bit more of that, but DC definitely has quite a bit of that as well. And but then there's the difference of how people look at the characters. A lot of times DC is portrayed as being extremely dark. DC itself overall is not dark. I think a lot of DC is really upbeat. Now that they've gone through ages where they've been very dark, so has Marvel. I mean, Tony's a horrible alcoholic who's thought about committing suicide, and like they have all sorts of horrible things happen to them. And so it's a lot of times it's like, well, the DC heroes, they're gods and they're less human. It is true that some of them are definitely of that thing, and that I think that's like the power structure, is that some of the primary DC heroes are just so ridiculously powerful that it does like overscale their universe. Like Superman and Wonder Woman are just so way up there. And then so when you have somebody like Aquaman, who goes toe to toe with him or something like it automatically like bumps him up. Same with like Batman. Like on paper, just looking at what their arsenals and their capabilities are, like Tony Stark should be able to wipe the floor with Batman. But the fact is, like, Batman handles Superman. And that's a lot more impressive than like Tony Stark trying to handle the Hulk by himself and having difficulty doing it. So it's like, it's one of those things where their universes are very different, but they definitely, and yes, Batman uses kryptonite, but Batman fights Superman villains at times. Batman fights Darkseid and doesn't die instantly. Like that alone, like this is a character that can kill Superman with just raw force, and Batman's able to go toe to toe for him and delay him while other heroes get there. Like that's kind of insane. But on a note, I think in like Marvel also being the more comedy driven, I do think that is. But one of the other things is that it's which superheroes are getting shown on the big screen, because I think that like Wally West Flash is very much comedy, like Spider-Man. He's got the quips, he's got the like cheesy one-liners and all that kind of stuff. Hal Jordan's Green Lantern does a lot of that as well. So there are bright and cheerful and Static Shock, another great example of someone who's very Spider-Man-y in his quips and how he deals with his villains. But in general, one of the things that DC does that you do not see a lot of in Marvel is DC does characters who are super powerful, but having to come to the grips that they can't always protect the ones they love, that they can't be everywhere at once. And that's done really well with like a character like Superman. Like he has all this power, all this ability, like nobody can stop him, but they can get to Lois, they can get to Jimmy, they can do all these things that are out of his control. And that weighs on him. And he also has to hold back, because if he lets into his rage, like innocent people die. If he isn't cold and calculated about how he's doing things, if he isn't watching himself, making sure that even though this bad guy that's punching him and knocking him around and is not a lightweight, if he let loose his full punch, like it would shatter the earth. So he can't do that. Even when a guy is strong enough that it's hurting him, he can't go full tilt. And so I think that's something unique that you do not see a lot of in Marvel. You do have like the Silver Surfer, and occasionally they do that kind of thing with Hulk, where he's dealing with the fact that he doesn't have full control when he's the Hulk, and so the Hulk also hurts people, but sometimes he's the necessary evil to defeat the bad guy, who's killing millions of people. So those are some unique characters, but you have more of that in DC. But I think both of them have a big cosmic scene. However, I think there are a lot more aliens in DC. Even though it feels that way from the MCU, it feels like Marvel is way much more like cosmic and out there. DC from the New Gods with Darkseid and all that kind of stuff, but also you have all the different aliens that the Green Lanterns fight, and you have just such a plethora of aliens coming to Earth, just being a constant thing. Like characters like Lobo, the Martian Manager, like all of when the White Martians invade and all that kind of stuff. You have Ultron, who is Earth-based, versus Brainiac, who's alien, coming in there. Evil Kryptonians. So you have this constant thing with DC. So it's just kind of my interesting thing is, like, personally, I love the MCU better than anything DC has really done in the movies. But I'm a DC guy. I like more DC characters than I do Marvel characters. When it comes to Marvel, I am primarily Spider-Man, and then like some Iron Man, some Hawkeye, some of the primary Avengers. But I'm not big into Marvel. I'm big into DC. I don't like most of the DC media that comes out except for the animated stuff. Okay, next one. Rouge One Radio. Talked about the Disney Dark Ages, as they're so called. And I really enjoyed this discussion. And you went in, you talk, like, let's see, we have Aristocats, Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh, Rescuers, Fox and the Hound, Great Mouse Detective, and Oliver and Company, and Black Coldren. So these are kind of considered the bad. So let's go through these. Aristocats, it's catchy tunes. I sung along. I love that as a kid. Robin Hood. I adored this movie as a kid. I would watch this over and over. This made me a huge fan of Robin Hood. Like, going on into the future, like, I read books around Robin Hood, all this stuff. But this is the movie where I got that interest. This is how I found out the story of Robin Hood came from this animated movie. And I always go back to it. Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh. Once again, like, I have a huge charm for Winnie the Pooh. I would say Winnie the Pooh for me is bigger than Mickey Mouse. For me personally, like, that's my classic like icon character. Like, I love the 100 Acre Woods characters, and as an adult who's grown out of, so to speak, those kind of cartoons that are more geared towards younger kids, Winnie the Pooh is the one that has the charm that I can still watch. I can still, like, I just like it. And it's not slapsticky funny like Looney Tunes or something like that. And it's not like some great adventure story or great amazing plot that as an adult I appreciate, or has humor that goes above what kids like Toy Story or some of the Pixar movies do. It's it's not Treasure Planet. It's Winnie the Pooh. It's just wholesome. It comes out wholesome, and which is to me, when I think of like a character like that, that's just wholesome, I think of characters like Mickey Mouse. And to me, I'd rather watch Winnie the Pooh than Mickey and Minnie. That's just me. Now, I don't dislike Mickey and Minnie, but like Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore and Piglet and Tigger and all, like, I really like that. The Rescuers. Now, I'm more a fan of The Rescuers Down Under, which came later, but this, of course, is the original, and I think they had something here. I think this was good. Fox and the Hound. I love Fox and the Hound. I love the Fox and the Hound sequels. Fox and the Hound was fundamental for me. One, understanding I had a friend growing up. We took very different paths, and we've only recently reconnected. Meaningful. He went way different way, and for a while there, I kind of had the feel like we live in two different ways. And I have other friends that I've also had that experience with. Like they went completely different ways, were from different backgrounds. And like the friendship like was good, and then it came to an abrupt end, and kind of like you don't understand. I'm going and I'm living this life. Fox and the Hound was such a good fundamental helping me to understand the complicated situations that would happen in my life. I think it's an amazing tale. It's not basic. It's not. It has amazing lessons in it. And I just love this movie. It brings so much. The Great Mouse Detective. Once again, this is a movie that taught me about Sherlock Holmes. It was like this, and then Star Trek: The Next Generation, that like made me super into Sherlock Holmes. Where whenever something comes out about Sherlock Holmes, like Elementary, the show, or like all that stuff, the new movies, I'm consuming them. Why? Because this made me aware of Sherlock Holmes. It told me the way in the cartoon. Now, do I think this is the best Sherlock Holmes story? No, not by a long shot. But the intricacies and showing the laboratory and all the like, that has carried through with me. I am like super in to Sherlock Holmes style characters and the time period. Oliver and Country. If Aristocats I thought had good tunes, Oliver and Company was a knockout of the park. Like, this should be the movie that they say at the Dark Age. Like I said, why should I worry? Why should I care? This movie, I recently watched this with my daughter, and she just loved it. She loved it. This is such a good movie. Such a, Oliver Twist, taking these classic stories, telling them with animals. Lion King did that. Different ones have done that. And this was just a great example of that. Black Cauldron, never seen it. It was interesting hearing you guys talk about like this dark and depressing and like gloomy, serious kind of, what was Disney thinking, putting, like if some other animation studio did it, it would probably be praised. But coming from Disney, it's like, what in the world? This is not what we expect from Disney. So thought that was interesting, but it didn't sound like a movie for me anyways. Okay, last thing to clear this out. The Batman. Pretty much every Red 5 Network podcast talked about the Batman. I'm going to admit, I didn't listen to them all. I took a long time to watch this, so I did listen to about 6 or 7 of the podcasts about Batman after I finally saw the Batman months later after, when it came out on streaming. I finally went back and listened to a bunch of the podcasts, not all of them, but I noticed the trend was mostly very positive for the Batman. I am not somebody who was very positive on the Batman. I think there are 2 ultimate things that really stand out to me that make this movie bad. One is the length, and 2 is the Riddler. So this was the Zodiac Killer. This wasn't the Riddler. One of the key things about Batman is super bright, Batman's dark, but his villains are super bright, super wacky, super zany, and they're like stark contrast to Batman. And the Riddler is somebody who is all that wacky and crazy, but he's also intellectually equal with Batman, but not quite equal. Like, he's super brilliant, but Batman always eventually outsmarts him. Like, the Riddler has all this time to plan and elaborate and all that, and then Batman cracks it and stops him. So in that way, the Riddler has prep time, Batman doesn't, and Batman still wins. In this movie, the Riddler had none of the pizzazz. He was definitely like your typical... this is the same thing I had a problem with the Joker in the Nolan trilogy, that everybody loves, is that Joker, to me, felt like a character from Criminal Minds. Where you compare that to like the Jack Nicholson Joker, which everyone's like, oh, he's looking like, whether you like Jack Nicholson or not, that reminds me of the Batman the Animated Series Joker. You look at that Joker is not just out to murder people and be like, the chaos. He's telling jokes and he's laughing and he's, got these wacky gadgets. He's electric buzzard killing people and he's squirting acid from a flower and he's constantly got the laughing gas that makes people like get the Joker smile and die from lack of oxygen from laughing too hard. That stuff is what makes the Joker truly terrifying. The Joker, for the sake of the joke, will put himself in harm's way to do that. And him being so out of there, him being some brilliant strategist, planting bombs here, maneuvering, stuff like that. Once again, that's more like the Riddler. All the planning, but he's doing all this like he's out thinking Batman. That's not the Riddler. I mean, that's not the Joker. That's a serial killer. Yes, the Joker is a psychopath, but it's all the, like, his elaborate schemes are like super showy with giant blimps with his face on them and stuff like that. And you go, oh no, you're thinking of Batman 89. No, I'm talking about Batman the Animated Series. Like, everything Joker did was always some big elaborate scheme, or, a robot clown captain, or, giant exploding pie bombs and just all sorts of weird stuff. The Riddler. See, I look at Jim Carrey and I go, you know what? If he had a director that could reel him in, that he respected and can tell him, nah, do it again, a little less, I think he would have been the perfect Riddler. But he went too far. He was off the rails, and it was also brought down on the actor who played Two-Face trying to compete and make Toothpaste as any character, where Two-Face is more dark and serious. And that brought that movie down, having them both be kind of wacky. But this one, it's like the Riddler is all about political messaging and getting against corruption and all that. Like, that's not the Riddler. The Riddler is all about the desire and need to get the thrill of the crime and to outsmart Batman, to prove that he's the smartest. It starts out with him wanting to outsmart Gotham PD, wanting to prove that he's smarter than all the cops, and just because he's so smart, he needs the high, the thrill of leaving clues, all that. That's not because he has some political message or something. And then when Batman comes on the scene, then it's like it explodes, like he has a true challenge, and now he's got to overcome that challenge. That's the Riddler. We didn't get that Riddler. That really wrecks the movie for me in a lot of ways. The other thing that wrecks the movie for me, and this is something that started in the Nolan trilogy and was through the Zack Snyder trilogy and now is in this movie, is this people who take on Batman. Batman's one of the few superhero movies that can win awards, that can transcend the superhero, because we can set him in a more realistic world. It doesn't have to all be a CGI fest, and we can have all these artistic camera shots, and we can win some filmography awards, and we can do all these artsy things that art house films do with Batman, and we go, this is cinema. This is, when I go to see a superhero movie, like, no one goes to Godzilla and go, this is cinema, this is high art, this is, it's big lizards fighting. When you go to see superhero movies, I want to see superheroes fighting supervillains. I don't need it to be artsy. This film, so many times, was raining all the time, and it was like, pan shot here, zoom in, brood, and then here. If they cut out all the time scenes of, there's at least 30 minutes of combined Batman brooding in this movie, where it's just still shots of him, in probably 40 or 45 minutes if you combine all the characters that have brooding face focus moments in the rain, staring, just, or from their backside of the cameras, wide shots, zoom shots. This, it's nice. It's cool. It's like, it's one of the things that, like, I like in a Dune, and it's nice. But to me, it made the movie drag on. And so you already have this thing of the Riddler against the movie, and it felt like this stuff was more a focus than the Batman stuff. Now, the thing that was a big contrast to it, though, I like Adam West Batman. I like Batman and Robin. Just Batman Forever, like, straddled the line too much, and I didn't like it. But Batman and Robin, like, it went so zany that I like it as a so bad it's good type movie. I like the Adam West camp. There's a moment in this movie when you see him, like, from the side, and I think they CGI'd Adam West's nose onto the Batman. Either that or him and Robert Pattinson have the same nose, because it was like the same exact silhouette, and he does a head movement that reminded me just of something like Adam West does. And it was so striking, and I've heard other podcasters mention it, that I'm like, that was done intentionally. I look at that and I go, I can't get over how many times, like, a bomb's about to go off. What does Batman do? Does he, like, turn around and run and then, like, survive the explosion? No. He looks at the timer with his face, the one part that isn't in armor, right up to the bomb, till it counts down to 0, from, like, 30 seconds. And he's just staring at it like, how do I defuse this bomb? Oh, I don't know how. I got 3 seconds. His face is singed. He took, like, a nap for a little bit, and then he got up and he was better. You know, he had the thing where he's flying off the building, and he's hitting an overpass, and the truck's running him over, and boom, boom, boom. And he's like, I limped for 2 steps, and now I'm all better, and I'm a fighting machine. The comic book Adam West goofiness of some of that stuff, of, like, just the invulnerable Batman, contrasted with all, like, these artsy, realistic, this is a grounded in earth Batman. Like, it does not match. Like, if they wanted to do, like, very cartoony, like, Batman, like, living through all these insane things and being kind of wacky and having the, whoa, you know, pow, like, the stuff would work if that was the movie they did, and they made it a little bit more colorful and a little more bright. But when they're doing, like, it's in the rain and it's dark and it's moody, and the villain's all, the government's doing you wrong, the elite of Gotham is bad. Then goofy Batman surviving things that should, like, totally kill him, and being like a bullet sponge that's like, oh, bullets, boom, 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 like high-powered caliber things. A guy hits him over the head with a crowbar, and I don't think, like, it doesn't actually connect, and I don't think Robert Pattinson knew it was his cue to react, because his head doesn't flinch, it doesn't move, like, boom. But, like, later on, like, a punch hurts him, like, it's so inconsistent. And so, for me, there's a lot about this movie that's fun. And I really think I like the bit of camp factor. I actually like it, but it doesn't fit with this movie. And so if they're going with a realistic, I think that it should go that way. Like, all the punches that hit Batman should feel real. You should see Batman in pain. You look at the Hawkeye show. And like Hawkeye, you feel like Hawkeye is a human in a suit doing things that he shouldn't be doing. And like when he's sitting down and he's like, but like you feel it. Like Hawkeye is an extraordinary guy, but he's a guy. And in Batman, he's got a healing factor in the Batman. That's the only way to explain it. So really comes across. So there are like things like the Batmobile. I loved the Batmobile. Love that car. Kind of mixing like the classic Adam West with newer stuff. This is a total year one Batmobile. Totally love it. If the bad guys had hopped in their cars and drove away and Batman went after them, it makes sense. But Batman's in a fight with him. He's already proven that he's bulletproof. And instead of taking them on one by one in this warehouse where civilians aren't around to get hurt, he hops in a car and he's like, come get me. And takes all the bad guys onto an interstate where he proceeds to cause, dozens of deaths by horrific giant traffic accidents that they're causing as they're shooting missiles and guns and weaving in and out of traffic and going down the wrong side of the lane. And like cars are just crashing everywhere. And you see like some of them are even cars with families in it. Batman could have taken them all out of the warehouse by hand. Why did he initiate the chase? Like that bugs me. Like little things like that. Like it's like this thing that's super cool, but that bugs me. And I'm super critical. Batman is my favorite superhero, so I am always critical. But here's the thing. They say, oh well, you're super critical, so you'll never be satisfied. Batman animation, like Batman Year One, the animation, brilliant, amazing. Tons, all these cartoons, and the cartoons of like the DC, what is it, the DC MU or AMU, the DC animated movie universe. That version of Batman is much more realistic than the movie Batmans. Like they're doing movies that are set in the tone that they're trying to accomplish with all these movies and doing it better. The writing is better. Why aren't these people writing the live action movies? But then you go, well, those people are actually just adapting a comic book. Why aren't we doing that for the live action movies? Well, why? I get like, okay, the live action movie, cost $500 million to make. And we don't want to have a storyline that you can go out and spend $20 on a comic book and know the ending to the movie. I get that. Yet they're inspiring and they're mishmashing a couple of comics together. And I always feel like they're losing the main point. But that's my thought. I'm not going to, like I said, 8 or 9 different people all had podcasts on the Batman. I know the Escape Pod, the Salty Nerds, Rouge One Radio. Like there were a whole bunch that did them that I listened to, but all the who said what about what or what they liked or didn't like, it all comes together. Scarif did one, so I just wanted to briefly kind of give my expanded thoughts on it. It's not the worst Batman movie. It's not the greatest Batman movie, but it was a disappointment for me because I waited so long, was not spoiled, and it seemed like universally everyone was like, this movie is amazing. And I didn't think so. But lots of other cool stuff that I enjoyed. We're going to see, I'm going to have the Red5 Network April Roundup coming. And that'll do roundup of a couple of different ones, plus the Moon Knight and Halo show, just like I did the Batman on this, and I did Book of Boba Fett on the last one, and probably when I get to June, it'll be the Kenobi one. I'll just throw on these shows that the Red5 Network in general is covering onto these roundups, unless I really deem it necessary to do its own podcast. But with that, hope everybody has a good day. and I'll catch you in the next video.